Hi, this is Stan Bush.
Hi, this is Stephanie Calvert.
This is John Payne.
This is Jack Hughes.
Hey everyone, this is Britt Lightning from Vixen.
Hey everybody, this is Prescott Niles.
Hi, I'm Carrie Stevens.
Hello, I'm Kofi Baker.
Listening to Play That Rock and Roll.
This is not a test. This is Play That Rock and Roll. I'm your host, Joe K., and today our guest is David Penzer, author of the new book, Sitting Ringside, Volume 1, WCW, which was co-written by a past guest on this show, Guy Evans. Much like when Guy was here last year, today we are stepping outside of our normal topic of classic rock and diving into a different media subject that I'm sure many classic rock fans enjoy, and that is, of course, professional wrestling. Specifically, the pro wrestling boom of the late 1990s. For those of you who don't know, professional wrestling peaked in popularity in the late 1990s, largely due to the competition for television ratings between Vince McMahon's WWF and Ted Turner's WCW. This period was known as the Monday Night Wars. During that time, the role of ring announcer over at WCW was held by one man. Today's guest, David Penzer. David was at every single episode of WCW Nitro and Thunder, so he had a front row seat to some of the biggest moments of the Monday Night Wars. And having the memories of all those big moments is why he's teamed up with Guy Evans to write his memoirs. If you remember, Guy Evans previously teamed up with another figure from WCW, Eric Bischoff, to co-write Eric Bischoff's second memoirs. Now, as it turns out, I happen to know someone who is a huge wrestling fan that has also done some ring announcing work of his own. So today, we are going to be joined by a special guest co-host, and that is Aaron Camaro from the Decibel Geek podcast. I met Aaron last year at Rockin' Pod in Nashville, and I think the Decibel Geek is a great podcast. So I saw this as a perfect opportunity to collaborate. Aaron agreed and brought some fantastic questions about the art of ring announcing. So in this interview, David talks about why he partnered with Guy to write this book, what bonus features they've included in it, and he also tells some stories about some big-name wrestling legends like Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Sid Vicious, and others. He also shares some insight into his philosophy on being a ring announcer, and we even end up talking about music for a little bit, which was really cool. You can learn more about the book at davidpenzerbook.com, and you can also find David on Twitter at David Penzer. You can also find his co-writer and past guest on this show, Guy Evans, on Twitter at Guy Evans Books, and also at WCW Nitro Book. Plus, you can find Aaron Camaro and the Decibel Geek podcast on all major podcast platforms and all social media. Links for all of the guys I've just mentioned are in the description below. And with that, here's our conversation with the author of the new book, Sitting Ringside, Volume 1, WCW, David Penzer. So we are here today with David Penzer, author of the new book, Sitting Ringside, Volume 1, WCW, which is his first memoir. David, thanks for joining us today. How you doing?
I'm excited to be on the Rock and Roll podcast, man. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Yeah, a little change of pace for most of the podcasts you've been on.
Yeah, we've talked some music. I've had a couple people ask me questions about who my favorite band is in concert and, best concerts I've been to and stuff. So we talk a little bit of music.
Real cool. And we'll definitely have some music questions, but since we're just getting started here, for those, because our audience is mostly music fans, and not necessarily wrestling fans or who are totally familiar with the wrestling world, could you give the background of your time at WCW, what you did for that company, and when you worked there?
Sure. I worked there in some capacity, full-time or part-time, from 1991 to 2001, when the company went out of business and the Monday Night Wars ended. I was the only ring announcer to ever make every WCW Monday Night Show, WCW Thunder, during the Monday Night Wars. And got to, like the book says, got to sit ringside for so many historic moments in the pro wrestling business during one of the biggest booms it ever had. So yeah, got a cool perspective. People may not recognize the name, but they may remember the guy sitting at ringside with the colorful bow tie and cummerbunds.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is your first book. It's volume 1, so obviously there's going to be a volume 2 coming down the stretch. What made you decide to write these books?
I had no intention of writing a book.
Oh,
That's the funny part is, people would ask me, "You going to write a book? You must have some cool stories." I'm like, "No, I really don't." And it turns out I did, but it took a while to get there. It took a couple twists and turns. About a year and a half ago, I was cleaning out my desk and I found a file folder with like 200 pages of old WCW internal memos, and especially rare formats that have never been seen, including the last Nitro format, which I'm shocked hasn't ever been released. But we released it. And so I took a picture of, and it's really cool because you sort of see the evolution of the wrestling TV format. Because like it starts out as a one-pager with, the Road Warriors versus two blanks, where that Jody Hamilton, who had booked the enhancement talent, would fill in the names of the enhancement guys that were going to work that night. And, the last Nitro, you have production notes and camera angles, and, it's probably 20 pages long. And, like Vince McMahon, interruptions and stuff like that. So it just shows the evolution of the entire business. But I took a picture of one of the WCW Saturday night formats from like 1994 or 95, and I put it on Twitter. And I was like, I just found these like 200 pages of them. Would anybody be interested in them? What do you think they're worth? How's the best way to sell them? Anyway, Guy Evans, the author of the Nitro book, and Eric Bischoff's autobiography, Grateful, reached out to me and said, let's do a scrapbook. We could put all these formats there, and in between the formats, we could tell some stories about the guys and stuff like that. And I said, that sounds like a perfect idea. So we started talking, and he started interviewing me, and about 3 months in, he goes, "We're making this an autobiography too." And I said, "Well, the formats are still going to be in there, right?" And he goes, "Yeah, of course." So I said, "Why would anybody want to hear my story?" And he said, "I don't think you understand, but at least in my opinion, your perspective is really interesting and your story is really compelling." And I said, "Okay, you're the boss." And he's told a great story of my career, to the point where he was sending me the book towards the end of the process in chapters, like one chapter a night. And like 4 chapters in, I turned to my wife and I said, "This is my story. It's my life. But I can't wait to get to chapter 5 and see what happens next." So yeah, it was a really out of body experience almost, but yeah, so I'm fortunate that it did. A lot of people are enjoying it. I've heard a lot of positive things from a lot of people that I know and don't know. And hey, if Guy was right and I was wrong, he's the boss. And I'm glad we ended up doing it.
yeah. Well, I am too. I read the book. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Guy was a previous guest on this show last year. He came on to talk about his previous 2 books. So very cool to see that you've teamed up with him for these projects. How do you like working with Guy?
Great guy. Guy's a great guy. Seriously though, he's brilliant. He's brilliant. I would like read chapter 2, and because he wanted my input on each chapter. That's why I sent it night by night after one chapter a night. And he wanted to see if I wanted to make any changes or had any issues with anything. And so like I got chapter 2 and I texted him and I said, just read chapter 2. You didn't finish the story about, whatever, fill in the blank. He goes, just wait till chapter 4. And he has a incredible way of weaving the story together where it keeps you on a ride. And, that's why I was so excited to read it, even though it was about me. Because it's told incredibly. He's I have a lot of respect for a lot of wrestling writers out there, and there's a lot of good ones, but I would say that Guy Evans is the best in the business right now, not even close. And as lucky as I have been to live my dream for 30 years and be a part of this crazy thing that I fell in love with when I was 11 years old, I'm just as lucky to have had Guy want to sign on to something like this, because there's nobody better to tell my story.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
certainly. I mean, he really planted a flag with that book Nitro. I mean, that got a lot of people's attention, and I think doing these great follow-up works with Bischoff and now yourself, kind of cements him as a premier wrestling writer. So
Yeah.
very cool that
Hey.
you got to work with him on that.
Hey, as a sidebar,
Yeah.
I know that you guys talk about music. I don't know if this is really classic rock. Probably it is. But I'm fascinated by the story of the Little River Band, and I'm trying to get Guy to make that his next book, to tell the story of the Little River Band. I don't know if you know it or not, but basically the short version is it's the name is owned by a guy who was a guitarist towards the end of the run of hits, with the lead singer of the last #1 hit they ever had. And the original guys who wrote the songs and performed, not only can't they use the name, they can't even come to America and use their real names.
Yeah.
'Cause they're from Australia, right?
Yeah, so it's basically a cover band with the last lead singer who had one hit, and owned by the guitar player who somehow ended up with the name and will not let them even tour the United States as a different name.
Wow.
It's, for me, it's fascinating, and there's some of that in music, but for me, just how that all happened is fascinating. You got 3 guys who formed a band and wrote a bunch of songs and then became #1 hits around the world, and they can't even sing the songs because some guy is being a jerk on a cover band out of Nashville. Don't get me wrong, I've seen the cover band; it sounds like them, and sing, as long as you know what you're seeing, not a problem. But anyway, I'm trying to get a Guy to write that as his next book. So if you talk to him, you might want to mention it.
No, I like that
Because I've heard of that guy, because I'm here in Nashville and I've heard of that guy living here.
Yeah, and there's so many good songs that could be the name of the book. You could use The Other Guy, which plays upon the fact that it wasn't the original guys. It could be Reminiscing. There's so many good names to the book. So I want to help him out.
Lonesome Loser is the guy who can't even sing his own songs.
Yeah, well, I hadn't thought of that one.
Well, what's funny?
You could use Cool Change with a question mark at the end.
There you go. That's funny you bring it up, because I have seen their website and they do have it's almost a book length explanation of the so-called lineage of the band and how convoluted it is. That is really funny you bring it up. Another band who's very similar, but it's not so much of an issue because all the original members are dead, is Molly Hatchet. Molly Hatchet is another band that has 0 original members and is still, touring out.
I thought I read their original drummer came back.
Not original, early 80s. But
gotcha. Because
yeah.
they were in town, and I just was at a festival, and I was thinking about going to see them, and I looked up their bio on Wikipedia and their set list to see what they were singing, and we didn't end up going, but yeah, I thought I saw, I guess not the original drummer, but at least a drummer that was with the band when other original members were there. There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
But usually those bands will let the former members, if there are any, perform as, formerly the lead singer of Molly Hatchet or formerly from Molly Hatchet. This guy won't even let him do that, and won't even let him perform in the States, their band.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Oh, who's the other one? The Guess Who. guess who is going through that right now? Because Randy
I
Bachman.
saw that they just came back out. No Burton Cummings.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You know, you could replace some people. You could replace the lead singer of Little River Band because this guy does a good job sounding like him.
Yeah.
But man, you can't replace Burton Cummings.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Mm.
All right, I'm going to steer us back to wrestling topics. Although
sorry.
I
warned you
love
that-
this.
I warned you that I would go off in a tangent.
And
More than
feel
one.
free to keep doing that. But
Right.
that stuff's really great. But here's I want to highlight a couple of the reason I like your book is that it is full of great stories, and there is an infamous story that wrestling fans know of, but some people watching this might not be familiar. And it is fascinating to me that you were in the room when it happened. And this is one of the first stories of your book. And I'm just wondering if you could share your memories of when Sid Vicious picked a fight with Brian Pillman and, threatened him with a rather unconventional weapon. This story cracks me up.
There was a hotel in Atlanta called the Dungeon. It wasn't the nicest hotel in the world, but basically it's where all the boys stayed, no matter what company they worked in when they were in Atlanta, because the manager was a former wrestling fan / other names that we don't use anymore. And so she gave everybody a deal, but more importantly, like the bar, which was called the Dungeon, was like tremendous, known for incredible parties after the matches. Obviously there'd be a lot of women there and different stuff. But so when we were in the Dungeon one time, and Sid walked in. He had left WCW and gone to WWE, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him and Mike. It was more Mike Graham than Brian Pillman, but it was both of them. It was both of them jaw jacking back and forth. And apparently, he was saying, I got out of this Southern bullshit wrestling company, and now I work in a place that has respect, and you guys suck, and you'll never amount to anything. And drinks had been had not by Sid, but by everybody else in there, pretty much. And so Mike Graham and Pillman start dressing them down, and you're a goof, and you'll never get over anywhere. You got a good look, but you can't fucking work a link, and all that stuff. And Sid said, "You'll see. I'll be back." And now, if it was today, I think we'd all run to our rooms because we think that he was going to bring a gun in.
Right.
We it's just funny how the world has changed. I never even thought about that. We thought it was going to be like a baseball bat. It was a squeegee. And he brought the squeegee in and held it up and said, "Come on, motherfuckers." And everybody at the same time just burst out laughing. And I've never seen somebody so red in the face. And he walked out of there, and we just continued drinking and laughing about it. But wrestling fans that were smart, for years would bring a squeegee to the matches when he was there and hold it up. It was one of those stories that if you're smart, probably was in the Wrestling Observer, one of those sheets. But yeah, it was, the Dungeon was crazy, and we go into even more crazy stories there. In addition to that one, there's a whole bunch of them in the book.
That is such a weird story. I mean, because Sid is one of those guys who you don't see him too often doing like shoot interviews. And he seems like kind of an unknown kind of guy. Maybe I just don't know enough, but like, was this in character for him? Did he do weird shit like that? Or like, what did you think of Sid?
He was all right. He was, didn't dislike the guy. He was kind of standoffish a little bit. Maybe that's not the appropriate term. He just wasn't warm. And he, in the wrestling business, there's guys that have big egos, but they could, like a Sting. Obviously he had a big ego. Hogan has a big ego, but it could also be Piper's perfect example. But when Piper would shake your hand, I was his book tour manager. We crisscrossed the country and in Billy Ray Cyrus's tour bus for 45 days. And he would shake your hand, and he would not only shake your hand, but he'd hold his other hand on the other side and warmly say, hey, really nice to meet you. Thank you for coming out. Even though he could be the biggest heel in the world and sold out made WrestleMania what it is today, as the antagonist. So, but there was something off about him. I'm going to be honest. Hey, I'm going to see him, I guess, in October. I'm going to be at a big time wrestling convention up in Ohio. And I just saw the poster, and he's on it too. So I hope he doesn't bring a squeegee.
Oh, you should bring one.
I'm trying to think if I had the balls to get him to bring a squeegee to see if he would autograph.
Oh,
I'm not sure if that's the appropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
I probably won't, but I'm tempted to.
Oh, shit.
Well, I don't know if you could see this, but I have this wrestling compilation DVD called The Ladder Match. And I was going through it earlier today because I remembered something from your book. The only WCW match on this compilation is one that I understand you were involved booking, which is the tag team ladder match for Starrcade 2000. So I know most people listening are realize that you were, a ring announcer, but near the end of your run at WCW, I know you got involved in booking matches. Can you talk about how you got this Starrcade match on the card?
Well, as people might remember, they broke up the Young Dragons and they broke up 3 Count, and they put the guys that left together as a third team, and they were just doing incredible athletic stuff that that hadn't been seen before. And we were trying to talk about the card for the pay-per-view. I was a junior member of the booking committee in the room. I didn't say a lot, but I would, if I thought I had a good idea, I'd throw it out there. They didn't always agree, but on this one they did. I said, how about triple ladder match? That's how it was billed, I believe. With these 3 teams, we could open Starrcade with a knockdown, drag out, spot fest. And they're like, you know what, that will do that. And I wear that as a badge of honor. Look, they went in there and they kicked ass and they hurt themselves and they stole the show. But the fact that, I don't want to sound cocky, but, I wear that as a badge of honor. And to hear that that's the only WCW ladder match in that makes me feel, makes me feel good. Thanks for letting me know that. I used to, just like Tony Khan did back when I was a teenager, I used to book my own territory. Mine never made it to TBS, but his was the national territory. Mine was a territory, like a regional territory. But I always thought, and Kevin would ask me ideas, every once in a while, and I still think, to this day, I have a halfway decent mind for what people will like. But, I try not to, I really didn't get involved. I was very involved in that with the XWF. And then since then, I've not been involved in that at all with any iteration of TNA or Impact. And that's fine. Yeah.
Well, it is the only WCW match on the compilation. And you're right, it absolutely stole the show, as far as Starrcade goes. So I do think that's one of the coolest parts of your career.
And again, not to interrupt, but again, huge credit to the 6 people in the ring.
Of course.
I could come up with a cutesy name and 3 ladders, and if they don't execute, then nobody remembers, and I don't brag about it. So, they put their bodies on the line. So huge props to them. I had a cool little idea, and they made it into a success.
Absolutely. Okay. One last story that I wanted to ask you about in the book, just because it has some relevance to some current news, is your story of when you first met Ric Flair, is that he kind of loses his temper with you. And I just have to ask if you had a chance to see the recent video that's circulating of him and wonder if that brought back any memories.
Well, I didn't do anything wrong, except spend money and put this place over and bring my family and friends here. That is bad for you.
Why would it be bad for me?
Well, watch social media tomorrow.
I don't follow social media.
Well, you better.
I don't get stuck on my phone.
What's your name, nut job? Nicholas what? Nicholas Dickhead.
I didn't see the video, but I could see the video in my head. I've traveled with Rick. You know, Rick's a nice guy. Rick doesn't mean anything by it.
Sure.
But Rick has a temper, and if he's, you know, in a bad mood or whatever, he has a tendency to go off on people. I saw that story, and I was like, oh, the probably bad timing or good timing with the book coming out. But yeah, he that was really discouraging because, you know, this was like my first non-indie show. Bob Roop, who was my partner on the indie circuit, booking indie shows, and we owned the Ring together, would his old friend was Danny Miller. Danny Miller was an older wrestler who used to run the box office in Florida and, you know, stuff like that. And so Crockett hired him to do a Clash of Champions at the Knight Center in Miami. And Roop, you know, said, hey, I know this guy. He's my partner. You know, if he doesn't, not looking for any money, but he'll help in any way. And said, yeah, send him over. So I saw it. I met him and I said hello. And I said, do you have anything I could help you with? And he said, no, not right now, maybe later. He said, you know, because it was a TV taping, so there was a lot of local enhancement guys. He said, you probably know some of the guys, you know, because a lot of the guys that were doing the enhancement on TV were the headliners of our indie shows. So he says, why don't you go down to the dressing room and talk to them, because there's an elevator. It was several floors. And of course, I'm sitting there minding my own business, and Ric Flair comes in, and who the hell are you? And the rest is history. I was out the door and in my car in about 10 minutes. And, you know, you can't predict the future. So at the time, it's like, geez, you know, what you know, that had so much promise, and it ended in such horrible fashion. But we laughed about it later on once I got to know him, and he, you know, he felt horrible, you know, just like I see he's apologized for this, you know, people get worked up, and you know, I respect the person who could apologize. I wasn't looking for an apology, but I respect the fact that he felt horrible when he heard about what had happened with me, and now obviously feels bad about this. So Rick's a complicated guy, but you know, but I respect the fact that he, you know, he's not just saying, you know, sticking to his story, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like I've seen him on other shows, and I think he can be kind of an emotional dude, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you know, try to make amends at the end. The only thing about the video that I thought was really funny, and I wonder if this sort of comes up in your life, is that he says to the wait staff something about how he puts this place over. He's using that wrestling speak, you know. So, you know, you spend so much time in that industry. Have you ever caught yourself, you know, saying things like put something over, or it's a work or a shoot, or, you know, gimmicks in like regular conversation with people who aren't familiar with the, you know, the wrestling world?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Because oh yeah, all the time. Probably several times in today. You know, today I was I'm a realtor. I was at a home inspection, and we found something that they tried to cover up. And I said to the lady who's a friend of mine, who's buying the house, I said, they tried to work us. And she said, what? And I said, oh, it's a wrestling term. They tried to get one over on us. And she said, oh, I understand. Yeah. And yeah, that's how we talk. I mean, my wife doesn't even bat an eyelash anymore. You know, we talk about that. I use terminology like that all the time, putting people over, and it's a work, and, you know, all that stuff. It's just how you learn to talk. You know, I haven't talked carny in a long time. So
ask about that.
No, I could do it probably, but I could probably do it.
You've been around long enough. You can speak some carny, I'm sure.
But I don't know. I don't think I'd want to try. I haven't spoken carny in probably 20 years.
Right. Yeah, that's
other than maybe saying kize fize, you know, right. under my breath to, you know, at a wrestling show. But yeah, that was interesting back then, because people would have whole conversations in carny. It was a different time, man. There were no cell phones. There was no internet. I mean, think about it. There's no internet. Think about how important the internet is now. And there was none. You know, there was no satellite radio. You know, we got stuck driving to the next town looking, I can't think of his name, but listening to the guy who believed in aliens on AM radio.
Art Bell.
Oh, yeah.
Art Bell, you are correct. Thank you. Then we get to the hotel room, man. It'd be like 2 o'clock in the morning. And the only thing on was like Benny Hinn, the pastor, who would like raise his hand and all these people would fall down. Talk about a work. But totally different world, and I'm not complaining about it. It's just was different.
No, totally different experience. So the reason why I wanted to have my good buddy Aaron here to co-host this interview is that Aaron has done similar work that you've done. He has worked in the business a little bit, and he has done some ringside announcing. So, Aaron, I was wondering if you had any questions for David on that subject.
Well, I just like to start off saying that, of course, not on David Penzer's level, but I've done my fair share of ring announcing. And the first time that I ever had the opportunity to do it was I was at a wrestling show. It was earlier in the evening. I had no idea there was a show happening there that night. And I showed up based on a Craigslist ad saying they were looking for people and I wanted to work in the business. So I went in there and I talked to them and they said, "What can you do?" I said, "I've worked in radio. I'm not afraid of being in front of a camera. I'm not afraid of being in front of a crowd. I can talk, and they said, "Do you want to ring announce?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Great." But then because my heart was so into it, I had to stop and think, oh shit, I've never done ring announcing before. So my immediate thought after that was, how did Howard Finkel do it? How did David Penzer do it? Ladies and gentlemen, on his way to the ring, he hails from this town. He weighs about this many pounds. It's this guy. And I went in there and I knocked it out of the park because a lot of people don't give the ring announcer enough credit, I think. I mean, you look at some of the greats of all time and you think about how much they add to a match. But when you're watching it on TV, it's like, yeah, whatever. You see it a million times because it happens every single match. But if you really look at it, ring announcer's got a lot of power in his hands to make this seem like the most important place that you could ever be at this moment right now. And I'd like to say thank you to David Penzer for laying down the way to do it, where I could see it and go, that's how it's done.
Well, thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it. And you're right. And it's one of the reasons why Samantha Irvin is gained such a following both in the company and with fans is because she has a way of showing emotion in her announcement. And I'm not talking about crying when Cody won the world title and finish his story. I'm talking about inside the ring. She finds a way to bring an emotion in her introductions that I don't think I've ever heard before. And it's captivating actually. And so, she's the next big thing and God bless her. She actually reached out. I had put her over on one of the first podcasts I did when we started doing this media stuff. And she actually reached out, DM me and said, thank you. It means a lot coming from you, which meant a lot coming from her. So, but I appreciate it. I don't want to be in the same sentence as Howard Finkel. If there's a Mount Rushmore, there's 4 faces of Howard Finkel, and that's it. He was the best of all time. Nobody else is close. Just to be in the same conversation with him and in your mind and your thoughts is truly an honor for me. I thank you. I thank you for saying that. It means a lot. And yeah, it's more than just the announcing the people though. It's also working the crowd. I almost think you have a higher responsibility to the person who's booking you to, engage the crowd, get them excited, tell them what they could if they could buy merchandise, tell them if there's any sponsors to the show and promote the sponsors and put them over. Be sure to go visit, Larry's Pizza, then we thank them for sponsoring this show. They have great pizza. I don't know if they have great pizza or it sucks, but you tell people they have great pizza. That's why they paid to be a sponsor. So it's stuff like that too. But yeah, I appreciate it. Not everybody can get in front of an audience and speak to people. Like my wife is horrified by it. I've always found it easy. When I was in 4th grade, I used to do the morning announcements and the Pledge of Allegiance on the intercom. Did some DJ stuff on the radio and then, doing parties and stuff. And it just was something that never bothered me. It always came naturally. The only time it really ever bothered me is when I had to do my tryout match for WCW and I was petrified.
Yeah, I bet.
So, but I like to say I won by default because I was bringing guys up anyway and coming up every week and doing all these things behind the scenes to help them out. Uh, but I was so nervous. I wrote down every word, like every word. Not only I was going to say it on TV on the announcements, but every word I was going to say to the crowd in between. I had like 5 different cards written down word for word of what I was going to say to entertain the audience. And I would like do one, and then I do the next one in between. A couple of matches later, then I'd go back to the first one after later in the night, and everything was freaking scripted because I couldn't blow it. That would have ended everything that I had worked so hard to get that opportunity. So yeah, but thank you. I appreciate that. It means a lot.
And another thing that I picked up from you and that I learned in the business as a ring announcer, and this applies to referees, to people sitting at the commentary desk, when we're out there and I watch you do this, you're always a little apprehensive. Like you always know that you could be in serious danger at any moment. As a ring announcer, as a referee, as anybody that's not a professional wrestler, we're all mere mortals. We're just like the fans. So if you're in the ring and you show a little fear and a little apprehension of what's going on around you while you're in there doing your job as a ring announcer, it gives the aura of this person is dangerous. And that's something I picked up from you too.
I'll take credit for that. I always took that seriously. If there's a big old heel that's coming at my face, I'm running.
Right.
Maybe not running out of the ring, but I'm putting the referee in front of me or something like that. This is a show and each person has a character. Now it gets muddy in 2024 on which characters are the ones you root for and you don't, and that's fine. I like people to, deciding on their own. But back then it was more defined. And, if I'm not scared of him, why should the wrestler he's wrestling and why should the fans be? I'm a 5'6" non-athletic, guy. And, so I appreciate, nobody's ever brought that up that they noticed that, but I do make a conscious effort. And even recently in Impact, when I was doing it, I'd make a conscious effort to react realistically, because I think that's important. You're almost ruining the show if you don't.
100%. When I was booking for NWA Main Event, I had a referee that wanted to be a tough guy. And I took him aside, I said, look at these two monsters in the ring. If they were fighting out in the parking lot, would you by yourself try to break them up? And he was like, well, no. I said, then why the hell would you do it out there in front of the fans? You, me, we're mere mortals. These guys are superheroes. Make sure you portray that when you're out there. You better be a little scared.
In all fairness, you're not wrong, but in all fairness, technically the referee has the authority that should be respected to try to get in the middle of that. If anything were to happen to him, the wrestlers would be punished. I don't know that the ring announcer has that authority, but you're right. If you act like if you're 5'5" and act like a tough guy in front of 2 6'5" guys that are brawling, I understand where you're coming from, and you're right on. But it's funny, nobody's ever brought that up to me. I've done tons of interviews over the 20 years, and especially recently. So it's funny you picked that up. But yeah, I wear that as a badge of honor for sure.
What can I say, Dave? I'm a fan.
Now, do you wear the gimmick on the do-rag gimmick when you ring announce?
When I do ring announcing now, which I've been doing it down here in Nashville for about 15 years, because when I first moved down here, the TNA Wednesday night pay-per-views were happening at the fairgrounds. And I'd go with my brother, and those were some really great shows because you never knew who was going to show up. And I'd go down there with him all the time, and I'd see Jeremy Borash doing the ring announcing, and I'd go, man, I could do that. I know I could. So then I realized, man, there's a wrestling show happening almost every night of the week here in Nashville. I can get my foot in the door somewhere doing this. So I wanted to set myself apart. So I became like the rock and roll ring announcer. So I put my hair down, a bandana, crazy sunglasses, a spangly jacket. And
I love it.
I try to be somewhere like a blend between like David Lee Roth and Howard Finkel, and try to find that fine blend in there where, like you say, you're not just, on the way to the ring, calling the matches scheduled for one fall. You're also coming out and engaging the crowd. And so the baby face gets beat up. So I'll say, hey, people, let's hear it for him. He needs to hear it now more than ever, and that always brings him back up. So I'm always looking for opportunities to do stuff like that. And of course, being afraid of the wrestlers and just putting over that this is the most important thing that you could possibly be seeing right now at this moment. And I've worked for some really great shows here. I've been in the ring with Bret the Hitman Hart in the middle of the National Fairgrounds in front of 5,000 fans. That's a hell of a feeling. I can't even imagine what you must have felt at some of the shows you were at, but I got a hell of a rush off of that. And
that's crazy.
So I've gotten to do some pretty cool stuff. But like I said, it all starts with, what would Fink do? What would Penzer do? I know how to do this. So it's led me to do some pretty cool things. Do you remember, because I told you about my very first time, do you remember your very first show? How did you get the gig and how did it go?
Well, I was stooging around a company called, this is in the book, but I'll give you the short version. I was stooging around a company called Global Wrestling Alliance. They went on the penny stock market in '86 when Hulkamania was running wild and wanted to get their foot in the door of being a wrestling company, which ultimately became unsuccessful. But I was in the city I lived in, and I had a contact to get my pinky toe in the door, and stooged around there. Actually, me and Alex Marvez were the street team for the Global Wrestling Alliance. That's a name you might recognize. Yeah. So I didn't do TV because they had some Elvis impersonator guy they couldn't get over to do TV. I think he still does Elvis impersonator shows down there, but they asked me to do a house show in Clewiston, Florida. Yeah, I'll never forget. It was the main event was Corporal Kirshner versus the Iron Sheik.
Oh,
nice,
Cheeky baby.
And I still wasn't totally 100% smart. Obviously, I was smartened up a bit. But, there was still a part of me that's like all these guys that have huge, and this probably sounds like a stupid thing to say, but back then it was a lot more, they didn't give away everything. But, I was still in the back of my head, like, the guys that are feuding in like the WWE or WCW or NWA, are they like family, or do they keep to themselves? Obviously, they don't hate each other. That I knew. And I'll never forget, Iron Sheik was in the dressing room. He came around, he said, shook everybody's hand. And then Corporal Kirshner walked in and they said, and they embraced and they were like, hey, man, how you doing? How's your family? What you've been up to? And, we're thrilled to see each other. And that's when the final piece of that puzzle came about. And I realized that this is a fraternity and everybody are friends and, and it's all a show, but that was a cool opportunity. I wasn't actually so nervous for that one. I don't know why. I think probably because none of the bigwigs of the company were there. So if I'd have screwed up, but and I didn't have anything to lose. For all I knew, this was the only wrestling show I was ever going to ring announce. So I just tried to enjoy it. I didn't really worry too much about how good a job I did. I really didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't have somebody to guide me or to think about. But yeah, that was a fun show. Clewiston, Florida. It's the first one. And who'd have thought all these years later? Crazy ride. You could read all about it in City Ringside, Volume 1.
Nice.
Pretty cool that the Iron Sheik was your first match. I got a ringside announcing question for you. You write about how WCW brought in Michael Buffer, for the pay-per-views and some of the nitros, and I think you were pretty classy about that situation, whereas maybe a lesser person would be frustrated that they didn't get that role. What did you think of Michael, and did you learn anything about ring announcing from him?
He had a lot of emotion that I picked up on, and I might have used in different ways. So yeah, I mean, he had to. It was a catch line, but it was also the way he led up and built up to the catch line and executed the catch line, and that he was getting $10,000 or whatever he was getting for it, and he deserved it. I mean, he came up with something that popped the crowd and it made it special, and I had no problem with it at all. He was a super nice guy. Very, very cool. Didn't act like a big shot in any way, shape, or form. He was just happy to be there, probably more for the money than the wrestling. But but yeah, it's super guy, and I learned about how you could ride that audience on a little bit of a roller coaster, especially like in a main event or a big match feel. I did Ric Flair's last match in was that in Nashville? Yeah,
Was it Nashville? Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I just did the main event, and I used some of that Michael Buffer, in that building up to the, and bringing Rick out, and announcing the match and the lead up, and yeah, it's funny. Nobody ever asked me that. I never realized that. This book and these interviews I've been doing are like a therapy. I start to realize things I never thought about. But yeah, I did learn a lot from him and incorporate that.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
Great question.
Thank you. Well, as we're getting to the end of this, I got two, I'll call them smart mark questions about WCW, and I just wonder if you have any insight on them. The first one is about Goldberg. Obviously, Goldberg was the big breakout star of WCW. I've seen in shoot interviews, Kevin Nash and some other wrestlers say that as the streak went on and on and on, eventually fans were actually getting bored of the whole deal and were starting to chant Goldberg sucks. Now, you were in those stadiums for all of those shows, and I just wonder, do you remember ever hearing a large audience negative reaction for Goldberg?
No. I don't want to call Kevin Nash a liar. I could be wrong, but I don't recall that at all.
Sure. Nope, that makes sense.
Yeah, ringside for a lot of big moments. I always think about like Bash at the Beach 96 or the NWO promo the night after. Is that the biggest heel reaction you've ever heard?
Well, when Hogan turned heel?
Yeah.
During his promo, yeah.
Yeah.
The promo was crazy. We were gonna one of the names for the book we thought about was Dodging Garbage, because I spent the next 3 years dodging garbage. But I still think we should have gone with Dodging Garbage. But City Ringside had since I had the podcast with the same logo that's on the book, I felt that it would be more familiar to people. But I still, there's a part of me that wishes we would have called it Dodging Garbage. But yeah, I mean, yeah, probably that's the biggest heel promo I've ever seen, because the fans are legitimately mad. Hulk Hogan was a hero to them, and it's one thing if he drops a leg on Sting and pins him and he's the third man, but it's another thing if he's like, for years I've been doing all these things and you guys don't give a crap, so F you. That's real heat. You don't often see real heat. It's still there sometimes, but it's very rarely that you see legit heat in a wrestling show, because everybody's so smart. So if you could, I tell people this all the time, wrestlers. I've told people this in Impact when somebody got legit heat. I was like, I remember one time we were in Chicago, and it was a very, it was a lot of, we brought some Lucha Libre guys in for Impact, and it was a very Hispanic Lucha Libre audience, and it was a battle royal with whoever wins the battle royal gets the next world title shot. And the last two people were Eddie Edwards and what's the guy's name? He now works for AEW, but he got hurt and he's been out for a while. Maybe I'll think of it. This is what happens when you get old. You can remember every freaking word to the song American Pie, but you can't think of the luchador that you just announced a year ago. But he was super over with the crowd. He was like as over as anybody there. And Eddie was the one who threw him out. And I remember the way he played it up in the ring. People were throwing stuff. People were pissed. And I said to Eddie afterwards, I said, dude, congratulations, because you don't see real heat hardly any time anymore. But that was legit heat. They were freaking pissed. They wanted their hero to be the guy to get the next world title match, and he robbed them of it. And his reactions for it was great. And so it's hard to do now, but that was Hogan was legit heel heat, and yeah, again, you don't. It's hard these days with everybody smart. So when you get it, A, cherish it, and B, and dodge garbage, I guess.
That's awesome. On the flip side of that, what's the biggest babyface pop you ever heard from ringside?
I have to say Goldberg when he came out in the Georgia Dome.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet.
That was a homecoming, and he was as hot as he had been, and he's wrestling Hogan for the world title for the first time, and there wasn't a person in there that wasn't chanting on the top of their lungs. And yeah, I think that was it. The second biggest one was probably we're in the Superdome, and DDP had been flirting with joining the Hall and Nash with the NWO, and he acted like he was going to put on the T-shirt. We were in a sold out Superdome, and uh, he flirted like he was going to put on the T-shirt, and then he gave a diamond cutter to Scott Hall, and then another one to Kevin Nash. And if I recall correctly, he walked up in the crowd and celebrated in the crowd with a WCW shirt. That was a pretty big pop too. Those were probably two of the biggest.
Yeah, that's a cool moment. My last WCW question for you is, I don't know if you saw this, but there was a recent episode of Dark Side of the Ring that was all about Bash at the Beach 2000, mostly about how Jeff Jarrett laid down for Hogan, and that led to, Hogan leaving the company. And, I think that topic's been, really covered in depth. But the one that's similar to that really drives me mad, I cannot figure out what is going on here, is Halloween Havoc 1999, when Hogan lays down on the mat for Sting, and Tony Schiavone and the other announcers are seemingly very confused, and you can even hear them talking to you on that broadcast, saying, "Yeah, David, announce him again. I don't know what's going on." Like, do you remember what that was all about? Was Hogan supposed to wrestle Sting?
I hate to say this, but I don't even remember it.
Oh, no kidding.
No,
Well,
now I have to go. Now I have to go back online and look. Now, you've made me curious. I have a vague recollection of it, but I don't remember any of the details, and I really don't even remember the show. We were running pretty hard back then.
Oh, sure.
There's a lot of things that I remember and I retained, and there's a lot of things that just, I would have to guess that it was some kind of work to play off of what happened at Bash at the Beach before with Jarrett, but that would just be my gut reaction. I don't remember the specifics.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. It was just this weird thing where they played Hogan's music. He did not come out at all. Then they played Sting's music. He was champion. He comes out. And then they played Hogan's music again, and he came out in like street clothes, and he just talks to Sting, lays down in the mat. Sting covers him, and then it's over. And it's just like this really bizarre thing that I don't think ever had any sort of payoff or anything. But yeah, I can understand why you wouldn't remember it. It's
I know
it's
I'm
memorable
actually
for the
starting
wrong
to remember
reason.
it now. It might have been a shoot, but unfortunately I don't have that format. But
Oh
but
yeah.
yeah, it might have been a shoot. He just didn't want to put Sting over, and I don't know. The more I think about it, what year did you say it was?
1999, Halloween Havoc.
The more I think about it, the more I think that maybe Brad Siegel, who was running the company then from Turner, might have been involved in that. Starting to come back to me. I can't tell you definitively, but obviously it was. If it didn't have any payoff, it probably was a shoot.
Oh wow.
Because if you would have done it as an angle, you would think it would have a payoff. Now, again, you had the changes in creative often back then. Vince would go home, Eric would go home, Vince would come back. I liked it better when Vince was at home. But I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But sorry, man.
No, that's fair enough. Aaron, do you have any other WCW questions?
Weird stuff happening back then in WCW. It was hard to keep up with it sometimes.
Well, people started taking their ball and going home, so, you work out an angle and you a feud between these guys, and then, they broke their pinky toe or their finger. And I don't necessarily blame them. There was no one steering the ship, and there's millions of dollars of money on their line for each of these guys. And, if you can't get your crap together, maybe you should just stay home until they do. You could call it unprofessional, but you could also call it smart. Both don't have to be right or wrong. So it was just hard navigating those waters. It was torturous times. the good thing about history, like I mentioned with Sid, at least on my end, is, I don't remember, I remember it, but I don't hold the negative times in my mind. I just remember the good times. But going through it, man, it was very frustrating. It was extremely frustrating. And, things just started to fall apart, and never were able to get them back together, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was pretty bummed out the last Monday Nitro episode. It was a sad thing to watch.
You were bummed out.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Be in your shoes. Man, sometimes ring announcers get caught up in the action. What's the scariest bump you've ever had to take?
A bump for me to take?
Yeah.
Kurt Angle hit me with a forearm that almost knocked me out. Made me look like the Elephant Man.
Oh, that forearm was brutal, man. That was in TNA.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's a Jesus.
And he felt horrible about it. I got into the building late. I had permission. We didn't really get to go over it as much. And later on, and after that, maybe years later, he would say, if I'm being honest, I didn't, because since we didn't get to go over it, I didn't know if you would know how to take the right kind of bump. So I sort of laid it in. But I'm sorry, I feel horrible. And I've been asked about this before and recently, and I don't know if Kurt Hennig, if the same thing happened tomorrow, wouldn't do the same thing. He took it seriously, and if he wasn't sure you were going to, he laid it in when he was working. So, I no hard feelings. I got a bonus and a night off, and everything healed, and it was all good. But and it's a fun story people like to tell, and I rib them about it whenever I see them. But that almost knocked me out, man, legit.
Wow.
Yeah. What's the weirdest place you've ever worked a show?
The Gathering of the Juggalos.
Should have known.
That's a pretty easy one.
Yeah.
I did a rodeo early on in my career, but the Gathering of the Juggalos definitely is takes the cake.
Yeah. We did a wrestling show one time at the fairgrounds here in Nashville, but it wasn't at the sports arena. It was at the racetrack. And after the wrestling show was over, it was supposed to be a demolition derby. And so half the people weren't even there to see the wrestling. They were there to see the demolition derby. And then as the ring announcer, they tell me, hey, you got to make an announcement that says the demolition derby is canceled. And so I go, hey, wait a minute. And I point at this heel guy sitting there. I said, what if I say that somehow he had something to do with the demolition derby being canceled? And that was the guy who was working Hacksaw Jim Duggan in the main event. And they said, yes, do that. And so then the main event was a really big deal because half the crowd really hated that guy because he canceled the demolition derby.
That's smart. That's smart. Yeah. We once did a race, like what do you call it? Motorsports. It was in North Carolina. NASCAR. We just once did a NASCAR thing. It was before a big NASCAR race, and it was outside. It was WCW Saturday night, and I'll never forget. I would always count down the crowd. You're going live in 5, 4, 3. This is to start the show. And as I said, the skies opened up, and it started pouring on live television.
Whoa.
And that was messy, man, because people were slipping around and they really couldn't do much, and it was live. There was nothing we could do, but it was like on my cue, the rain started. But so that wasn't fun. But it's not always fun. But that was smart that you did that, because I don't know that if I was doing an indie show and somebody asked me to announce that, I would say that, man, I don't know if you're paying me enough for this, but you thought on your head, so good for you.
And then just one thing I'd just like to say to you, because it's a thrill for me, like I said, as a ring announcer, to get to talk to you. And what people don't sometimes think about is the mathematical odds. Now think about this. The mathematical odds of becoming a ring announcer in, say, WWE, AEW, or any other big promotion out there. So you got to think each wrestling show individually has got at least 60 guys on the roster. That means it's harder to become a professional wrestler than it is to be a player in the NFL just based on mathematical odds. So then look at the referees. There's probably about 10 referees. Odds go down quite a bit. But when you look at the ring announcer, there's one. And so in order to be a ring announcer on a worldwide level like that, you've got to be the best. And Dave Penzer, in my opinion, my friend, you are one of the best of all time.
Thank you. It means a lot to me, and I appreciate you guys. I'm having a fun time talking with you. And to make it even more improbable, if not impossible, this was in 1990s where you just they didn't allow people that weren't wrestlers backstage. You know, it just didn't happen. Nobody. I didn't care if you were like a celebrity or you were a mayor. Nobody went behind in the dressing rooms. You might go to the backstage area, but nobody went into the dressing rooms. And so yeah, so that made it even more improbable. So, but I'm so lucky, man, and you know, I've been doing these interviews and thinking about it and talking about it, and man, you know, I've been so blessed, to live. Who gets to live their dream for 30 years? So yeah, thank you though for the kind words. I really appreciate it. Hopefully, I can see you ring announce sometime.
That'd be awesome. Let me know anytime you're in Nashville.
Awesome.
I will.
I can get anywhere.
Well, before we get out of here, David, I got to give that podcast you used to do a shout out because I was listening to a couple of episodes, you know, to prep for this, and I listened to your interviews with Eric Bischoff and Scott Hall, and I thought those were really enjoyable. You know, I know you're working on these books and promoting the books right now, but you know, you're doing it via podcasting and showing up on all these shows. Are you tempted to get back into that? Maybe when the books are done?
I don't know. By the way, Scott Hall was one of my favorite, probably one of my favorite top 3 guests of all times. And it was really an example of when he had his shit together, how smart he was to the business and about the business. I sold the podcast archives to ad-free shows. They have the option to do what they want with them. I also sold the name Sitting Ringside and to ad-free shows, and for the podcast, not for the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if that's something that Conrad's interested in, and I don't know if, you know, that's something that's negotiable, and I don't know if I really have the time to do it. It was a blast when I did it, and I'm very proud of the 4 years of work that I put in and all the people that I got to interview. Maybe, but it's very complicated now. You know, a lot of the legends that I interviewed either don't have good memories or have passed, unfortunately. And, you know, it's very difficult with the companies, most of the major companies now having like PR people that like ask you to send the questions ahead of time, or are on the podcast, you know, and silently listening to make sure everything goes well. And it's hard to book them. And you know, so it got, at the end, it got to be more of a pain than it was worth. But like I said, I enjoyed the hell out of the 4 years I did it. And I'm extremely, as proud as I am on the book, I'm as proud as of that body of work that I did. So thank you for mentioning that. And, you know, some are up on ad-free shows behind the paywall, if you remember, but, you know, they own it, so they can do whatever they want with it. God bless them. God bless Conrad. Great guy, great businessman.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good podcast. And, you know, I'm only half serious, but maybe Conrad will want to bring it back just because he's got a spot open with, you know, Ric's show being done for forever now.
I saw that. He said he'd never do another one again.
Yeah, eesh.
I got to get the inside story to that. And that's his father-in-law, so it's even more awkward.
Yeah. I think because Ric had that falling out with Mark Madden too. You know, it's all tied together, I'm sure. But speaking about you know, bringing this back here, I just want to say, David, this conversation has been so much fun. You know, this is a music podcast. We occasionally talk a little bit about wrestling from time to time, but like talking to somebody who was like there. And we're both WCW guys. So like talking to somebody who was like at all of those shows has been a real treat. And I'm really glad you came on. What is the best way for listeners to get a hold of these books? And maybe you could tell us a little bit about the packages that you and Guy have put together, because I know that's a big selling point.
Yeah, they could go to davidpenzerbook.com. Or if they just want to buy the book, they can go to Amazon. It's the same price, free shipping. If they want to buy the bundles, there's different bundles. One of them has like a printed out format. There's a format in the book, but it's smaller. Has a separate printed out format of the last Nitro, and there's other formats that you could get as well. And based on the tier. And, you know, a lot of people have told me, and I think it's a great idea, I might do it myself, is go to a WrestleCon or a StarCast or something like that and get Flair and Sting to autograph that last, you know, the last page of the format with the last Nitro match ever, you know, frame that sucker, put it up in my office. That's a piece of history there.
Oh, big
so there's a lot of opportunities like that. I joked that I think we've created a new form of memorabilia. So, you know, that's pretty cool. So, yeah, they could go to davidpenzerbook.com. They could also follow me if you want to join the ride. You could follow me at David Penzer on Twitter, at David Penzer. Talk a lot about wrestling, talk about music, fantasy football during the football season a little bit. No politics. No, I haven't blocked. I've only blocked one person, Chris Cruz, who's lost his ever-loving mind. I don't know if you remember him.
No,
but,
can't say. Yeah, it doesn't ring a bell.
He used to be a good a semi-sane guy who was an announcer, play-by-play guy at WCW at the very beginning, and he's lost his mind and just likes to pick fights for no reason with people on social media, and I just had enough of it. But so yeah, you could do it that way, and I had a blast doing it, man. I'm glad you guys had me, and hopefully I can come back sometime. Maybe we could do a whole one just about music.
Hey,
that
sold. We will do that. And of course,
I'm going to steal them from you, Joe. I'm going to bring them on Decibel Geek.
Well, we'd certainly be welcome to come back for Volume 2, but you'd absolutely be welcome to come back just talk about rock and roll. Real quick before you go, is there a release date for Volume 2?
October.
October. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, shoot. Okay.
You doing any book signings?
I don't think so. I'm doing some conventions and stuff where I'll bring some books with me. I'm doing a virtual one Memorial Day actually for KNS WrestleFest, where I'm going to be there. And so if anybody wants an autographed copy of the book, they could go to KNS WrestleFest on Facebook, and it has all the information on the stream and how you could order stuff. And I'm gonna bring some of those old bow tie and cummerbund gimmicks and autograph them too if somebody wants to buy them that I used to wear in WCW. So that should be fun. That's on Memorial Day, that Monday, and I think it's like 1 PM, but you could go to KNS WrestleFest on Facebook and check it out. But no, I'm not going to do any book signings. But hey, you had mentioned that you used to go to the fairgrounds. Were you there when Piper came out to start the show?
100%. I was part of Piper's Pit. That would have been around 2013, I want to say.
Yeah, it was no. There was one in 2002 when I was on the book tour where he came out and confronted Vince Russo.
That was at the TNA show. I was at that show down at the fairgrounds when he came out, and yeah, he told him that he was the reason Owen Hart died.
Yeah, I arranged that whole thing. I was the conduit, and I had no idea he was going to say that, by the way. But I was that whole story will be in Volume 2. I was the conduit between. We were finishing up our book tour, which started in Nashville because we were on Billy Ray Cyrus's tour bus and ended in Nashville. And you know, I told him, I said, you know, I don't know if you're interested to get some publicity, and you know, but you know, I got Jeff's phone number on speed dial if you're interested, you know. And we actually pulled up in the tour bus. And when his music started playing, walked out. I stood, you know, in the back, but I was in the building. And then when he finished and we walked back in the tour bus and we left.
Wow. Yeah, when he said that to Vince Russo, that whole crowd went, "Oh."
Yeah, I didn't know what he was going to say, and you know, there's a lot of people that don't like Vince Russo for various sundry reasons. For me, it's not personal. I just think he was a horrible. I don't enjoy his style of writing wrestling. That doesn't mean it was bad. I thought it was bad, but that doesn't mean other people didn't enjoy it. My problem was if I don't enjoy something, I don't watch it. But unfortunately, I was getting paid to be there and have to sit ringside, so I had to watch this shit show. And but it's nothing personal. I wish him the best. I'd shake his hand if I saw him. I don't know if he'd shake my hand back, but I don't really care.
Yeah.
But let's do a whole one on music, man. Big music fan, music guy. And actually, my second dream, if I couldn't be in the wrestling business, was to be a tour manager for a rock and roll band.
That would be great.
So
Yeah,
being Piper's tour manager and crisscrossing the country in a tour bus was sort of like I kind of living my second dream.
Right?
Yeah, getting there.
Amazing.
All right. Well, hey, David, this has been an absolute blast. Yes,
Yeah, I've had a
absolutely.
good
Come back.
time.
We'll talk about
I've had a
music. We'll
great
talk
time,
about
for
Volume
sure.
2. It'll be great.
Definitely, for sure. And if you don't follow me on Twitter, follow me. Be sure to tag me on when you put this up, so I could tell everybody what a blast it was, and hopefully you could get some new listeners. I want to. If you do about music, I'm interested in subscribing or whatever you do to be able to get to see the podcast every week. So tag me and stay in touch, guys, for sure. This has been a blast.
Absolutely will do. Absolutely will do. Thanks again for your time, man. It has been awesome speaking with you. Hey, thanks for listening. There's no shortage of great content out there, so you choosing to spend some time listening to this show means quite a lot. If you're so inclined, please give this podcast a 5-star rating and a positive review wherever you get your podcasts. And share our links wherever you can. Or mention this show to anyone you know looking for a podcast recommendation. All of this helps us out a great deal, and I appreciate it. You can connect with us on social media too. We are at Play That Podcast on Facebook, Threads, Blue Sky, and even TikTok. Or we are at Play That Rock and Roll on YouTube and Instagram. Please post a comment and say hello. Finally, Play That Rock and Roll is a proud member of the Pantheon podcast community. So if you're looking for more music podcasts beyond this one, trust me, start with Pantheon. You won't be disappointed. Otherwise, I appreciate any and all efforts you take to support us here at Play That Rock and Roll. Be sure to join us next time for more great music and stories from the world of classic rock.